Hello everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on the story of plastic. By now, I hope you've had the chance to watch the documentary presented by the Story of Stuff project, which is a nonprofit dedicated to changing the way that we make, use, and throw stuff away so that it's more sustainable, healthy, and fair. My name is Stacy Ludington. I am with Clackamas County Sustainability and Solid Waste. We have a great group of panelists here this evening, but first, a little bit about how this webinar will go. For the first half hour, I will ask our panelists a few questions about the documentary. During the second half hour, we will take audience questions. All audience members are on mute, but you can enter questions into the Q&A feature. It's at the bottom of your screen. You might have to hover over it for it to pop up. There's also a chat feature down there, but we will not be monitoring that. Questions need to go in the Q&A feature. My coworkers, Tenille and Dakota, will help us out with those when we get to that portion. And we likely won't get to them all, but we'll do our best to get some of those. We are also recording this discussion for people who are unable to join. So it will go up on the Master Recycler YouTube channel. So with that, let's get started by introducing our 5 amazing panelists. So we have Lauren Norris. Let me give a wave. She's coordinator of the Master Recycler program. As most of you are Master Recyclers, you probably are familiar with Lauren. We also have Nancy Nordman. Nancy is chair of the Portland chapter of Surfrider Foundation, a grassroots nonprofit focused on keeping it clean upstream. So we have Brion Hurley as well. He's president of the Recycling Advocates, an Oregon-based grassroots group dedicated to engaging people in creating a sustainable future through local efforts to reduce, reuse, and recycle. We also have Dave Claugus. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
He's one of the owners and operators of Pioneer Recycling, a local material recovery facility, and brings an economic perspective to recycling. And then we also have Dylan J. Thomas with Recycling Partnership, a national group putting research and private dollars to work in communities to improve recycling. So thank you all for joining and giving your perspective on this documentary. Very much appreciated. So with that, let's get started. So the story of plastic presents a timeline of how we got to our current global plastic pollution crisis and how the oil and gas industry has managed to maintain the conversation around it. I found myself getting quite worked up throughout a lot of it for various reasons. So with that, with our first question, was there any particular moment in the film that stood out or stuck with you since watching?
Yeah, and I think I'll start just because I do want to thank Master Recyclers for being here. It's really, we can't see you, but it warms my heart to know you're out there and here and excited and engaged. And I also really want to thank Clackamas County because this is a really great opportunity for Master Recyclers to connect on an issue that's important to us. And it's really great that Clackamas opened it to the whole region of Master Recyclers. So thank you so much for hosting this. And I think I'll just be brief on this first question. I think that the moment that really hit for me was moment 3 of the movie when they said that this isn't a waste management issue. I was like, oh, thank you. Because I feel like I've seen so many movies about plastics and they go through 2 hours of talking about the problem and there's one solution is usually let's do biodegradable plastic. And then they talk about it for about 2 seconds. And that's their only solution. And for them to start and say that this is about, systems and policies and not just waste management in the first 3 minutes, I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna actually like this movie. I'm gonna get something out of this. Anybody else?
Yeah.
The size of the landfill in Delhi, I think, was amazing, and it was depressing at the same time. So that was really, I was just blown away, and just in shock.
Yeah, that was the one with the bird flying with the piece of plastic stung around its leg. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I think for me it was a I was reminded of the documentary Plastics China of when they had the scrap yards that were in Indonesia that were recycling the materials, and just kind of trying to think about their how the materials that are being shipped or were being shipped over there, how they're being recycled but also not being managed properly. Like I was really struggling with that, and kind of there was a lot of a push and a pull, trying to not just look at it from an American perspective, trying to look at it from a local perspective there too, and it really was it was hard. There was a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of really challenging stuff.
Yeah.
So my continuing thought with the film is, number one, the jury's still out. I'm certainly not a friend of the plastics industry, but I'm not sure they presented a totally unbiased perspective of what's happening overseas, simply because they didn't present any evidence in that area.
Well, what are you thinking of when the other side? Because you mentioned the other side.
Well, there may be mills that handle the material quite appropriately. There may be countries and or areas of specific countries that have something equivalent to the modern landfills that we have here in North America. None of that was addressed in any way. There was no evidence presented about how much the examples portrayed reflect the total picture in these countries. So it just leaves me wondering, what is the total picture? I mean, to give you an example, for 6 years I had my own e-waste business, and throughout that tenure, when I meet somebody at a cocktail party or whatever, and I'd explain, well, I own an e-waste business, I do e-waste recycling. They go, oh, do you ship any of your screens overseas, where they end up in a creek somewhere broken and the lead's exposed to the water and so on? Well, there were a few unscrupulous operators around the country, most notably in Texas, that did some of that. But my business was in California. Number one, I didn't export. And number two, we were highly, highly regulated by the state of California. I mean, nothing happened that they didn't know about.
Yeah.
Everything was handled quite appropriately. So, the news media was presenting one picture of the story that my friends at the cocktail party heard and remembered, and my own reality was substantially different. So I'm just not sure, what the total picture is in looking at this plastics documentary.
Right. There are good players and bad players. And I think one of the things that stuck out for me from the video was that a lot of the items that were sent over there are things that we don't even accept in our current recycling system, that are not accepted curbside.
Yeah.
So that stuck out for me. Nancy, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, but I didn't want to cut anybody off.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to, say that I've seen this film a couple of times now, and each time like kind of a different scene stands out, I think, depending on what I'm thinking about. But I think that the scene, I think it was Tiza, when she's like in the boat and floating around along the river and just sort of commenting on like, I talk about this issue and I want to take people here and I want them to see the issue and feel what I'm feeling. I think for me that resonated just because like a lot of times I feel like I hear like, oh, our Oregon coasts are so clean and they're so pristine, and you know, they do look that way on the surface, but as like somebody's done a lot of cleanups and just walking the beach line and looking at that water line and seeing like the multicolored bits of plastic that are right there on the water line, it just kind of brings to home for me like how much this is an Oregon issue. This is a global issue. It's not an over there issue. It's everybody's issue, and we all need to play a part in it. So yeah, that's the scene that resonated for me.
You're muted.
Let's keep moving along, just so we make sure we get through all our questions. So the next question is, did the film bring to light anything about our own recycling system here in the Portland region? So who would like to go first?
Well, I have a few thoughts in that regard. Of course, I own a MRF in the Oregon system. In fact, right in Clackamas County, as a matter of fact. So what the film brought to life for me was how different things are here than they are as portrayed in the film. I know our own MRF, we've invested millions of dollars to properly sort and collect plastics, including optical sorters and robots, and some of our own unique processes. And we really do a good job of getting all the plastics that come through our facility in the proper place, all the PET in one place and HDPE in another, and so on. And we have a robust infrastructure for doing that here in the Northwest. After we're finished with it, we send our plastic residuals to a secondary processor up in Canada. Their business is only plastics, and they're vertically integrated. They make pellets right there, so very efficient. And that processor tries to glean anything that we might have missed. And then what is useless to them, then in their case, they send to a cement kiln to burn for energy. Cement kilns are very high energy users. And so we do not ship any mixed loads of plastics overseas. It's either domestic or to Canada, and we're confident that Canada has a good solid waste infrastructure in place. So what I saw was just how different, or I noticed how different things are here than over there.
Anyone that works with more of a national lens want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just struck me how, a couple of different things. I mean, one, just taking a Portland's perspective, which I often do when I'm thinking about solid waste and recycling, is just how lucky and blessed we are that we have, that we have such a well-managed solid waste and recycling system that has players like Dave, leading it. And that we are lucky enough that our tax base is strong enough, and that we have political leaders that have dedicated dollars to make sure that that system is supported, because that's not the case in a lot of the country. Roughly half the U.S. is not like us. You don't get a recycling cart right away when you are getting a trash can as well, and the work that needs to happen here on the national level, and then obviously the great amount of work. I just kept thinking about how we could fix this. What are some things that we could do, and just the massive amount of effort and capital that needs to go into helping solve that problem.
I guess I would also add that I feel like that there's a lot of pressure in the state and the region to recycle everything, and to try to put all our energy and money into recycling more than we're recycling, especially in plastic. and that's going to solve things. And I think this movie really emphasized that isn't going to solve things, and that actually us being wishful recyclers and putting things in to containers that don't belong there ends up putting trash in landfills that can't manage them in other countries. So, that doesn't actually make a lot of sense to be putting plastics that don't belong in there. And I think to put our creative energy that it would take to solve the plastics recycling problem, we should put that creative energy into really innovative solutions and policy and behavior change and community infrastructure to reduce reuse. And the movie just really told me that get our recycling right. We have a really good list here in our region. Let's get everyone on board at understanding what we're supposed to put into the container and what we're not supposed to, and get it really nice and clean at the MRFs and at all of them. And it's because yes, Pioneer is fabulous, and make sure that we're all kind of at a good high level of doing a really great job of recycling here, and then let's move on and reduce and reuse.
Yeah, I would, just to follow up on that, I would so echo what you're saying. I think this film just really showed like our collective responsibility and just highlighted that, what we do here has impacts on a global scale, and we need to be very conscious of that and very aware of that. And so while, there's a lot of things that I think we can be so proud of, the fact that we've had a short list of what goes in, I think is a great thing. The fact that we are one of the earliest cities to ban the plastic bag in 2011, and that we now have, we have a single-use plastic reduction policy in Portland, and just all these growing reuse systems that are creatively coming up. I just think we need to keep the momentum going. I think we have such strong leadership, and we should be using that to further the conversation. And if the question's coming up of should we recycle this, the back of our head should be why, or like what's the what's the deeper reason to recycle it, and is it actually the right thing to do in terms of a environmental perspective, and in terms of is there something else we can do that's even better, even source reduction or reducing. So
yeah. All right, we're gonna Brian,
I was going to say that just a general comment, I kept thinking about the financial model around recycling, and I don't know what the answer is, but it just kept seeming like it's broken along the whole system. There's gaps there that the incentive to do the right thing isn't there, and it's easier and cheaper to just not recycle. And so I don't know where that gets addressed, but it's in the demand for the recycling materials, to the pollution, to the incentives for companies to provide products and packaging that is recyclable. I mean, it just seemed like all that there's huge gaps there that I don't know how to address that, but it just seemed like the financials seem to not be lined up very well.
And I know you wanted to move on, but I think
yeah, go ahead and answer real quick to that.
The piece that you actually were going to go to next, I think, speaks to that a little bit, is that our state is really looking at that. How can we improve recycling systems in our state? And DEQ is in a process that the MRFs and local jurisdictions are all and state are all involved with, and they are exploring what they're calling producer responsibility options, where you're looking at having producers as well paying into the costs of recovering the material. My one thing that really flagged to me in the movie even more was that I wish that we didn't always have producer responsibility only focus on end of life. I think the cost of making the products and it should also be embedded in the cost of the products, so that we're paying for that cost as well. But our MRFs need more resources and support, and our collection system needs more support, and that's what this producer responsibility would help do, is pay into that. But it should also pay for cleaner manufacturing, cleaner, or maybe we wouldn't end up with Coca-Cola in the first place if it costs so much to have it. Maybe it's not a product we need anymore. I don't know. So we're worried about its package, but the Coke itself, is it really a product we need? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of leading into the next question too, talking about like a local pilot recently took place in Portland to sort mixed plastics left over from the first round of sorting at our local MRFs, or material recovery facilities. The idea being that if these harder to recycle plastics were just sorted better, that there could be a market for it. So what do you think of that? And is that continuing to support the narrative that the plastic crisis is a life issue instead of a plastics issue?
Well, we were a participant in that. We supplied some of our material. And basically how it worked is they just ran the material repetitively through an optical sorter, you know, essentially identical to the sorters we have in our own facility. But they ran it through over and over again to simulate the results you might have from the secondary processor, which are primarily, to my knowledge, currently up in Canada. Canada's subsidized their plastic recyclers to build these facilities. So, I mean, the experiment, I think, was successful as far as it went, but, you know, hey, I'm an economist by training. From my point of view, the marketplace has responded quicker than Metro sponsoring this experiment did, in that there's two existing facilities, both in Canada, that are actively trying to source this material. And both of them are vertically integrated. They take the plastic, sort it through a number of optical sorters, and then convert what they can use to a plastic pellet and sell that directly to new plastic product manufacturers. So, you know, it's a great part of our industry. But having worked with these groups directly, what I get struck by is that even with all of their singular focus on plastics, there's still about 40% of the material we send them is unusable in their process, and they're about as efficient as you can get. And that's where I think we can do some work as a community to ask the consumer product manufacturers and whoever else is introducing projects or plastics into our community to use plastic that we can recycle, that have good markets, that have decent end uses, and it doesn't seem that hard to me. And I wish the plastic folks would get on board with that.
Others have other things to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what struck me with that is kind of, and Stacy, you had mentioned that you'd share this piece out, but I think the Plastic Wars piece from NPR and Frontline kind of showed, you know, some of this investment narrative that we've heard before. And so I think I just, you know, thinking about COVID and thinking about the low price of oil right now, it'll just be interesting to see what brands actually hold to their commitments. And I think that if there was a strong market, that those would have happened. And so it's not that I think that it's entirely a bad idea, but you know, Surfrider is really focused on source reduction and preventing the waste to begin with, and we're going to continue to like push that to continue to further that conversation, because I think that's really where we need to be. And even if we're recycling all these things, it just goes back to what this whole film was about, which is if we produce this amount of plastic, the production is having impacts on communities. So we can recycle it all, but the production facilities are still going to be there churning out more plastic. And so we have to pair that with reduction. Absolutely. I think so, personally.
Lauren?
Yeah, I'm super excited that we're talking about economy, because I just think that this is what it's about. I mean, of course, it always is where it goes with recycling, but I think that I'd even take it a step further in their solutions. They were talking a lot about putting policy that makes it economic pressures to reduce and reuse and use recycled content products, which I think is a really good solution that really, you know, that so that there's a market for the materials that the MRFs are creating. That's critical. But you know, right now we're working with policies with the city of Portland that's kind of, maybe we need to change the measurements. Maybe it's not about if our economy is about the movement of stuff, then we're still going to just keep talking about how much stuff are we recycling, how much, you know, and whereas what if the measurement is how well are we as human beings? Are we healthy? Are we happy? Are we satisfied? Is everyone satisfied? Is everyone getting what they need? And if our economy was actually working towards that as a goal, and we were measuring our goals based on satisfaction and also whether our ecosystems actually are being overshot, or if they're actually within a system that it works, that those kinds of measurements need to be on a local level, on a state level, on a national level, instead of poundage of stuff that we're moving around. And that's why I love the story of stuff and their movement, because they're bringing it out. We're talking about our stuff, and we talk a lot more about packaging than I'd really like to talk about. I think it's about the products that are in the packaging that you know, we wouldn't need the packaging if we stopped buying all the stuff. You know? So, but move the measurements up a scale.
Dylan, you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that everybody has been saying. I just think that it's both. You know, we have a system right now. I don't think of it as an either or. I think of it as a yes and. I think we really do have to support the recycling system. And I thought that the test facility was a compelling case to try to sort the materials out. When you sort materials more, there is more value from them. Mixed materials are what was being sent overseas, generally speaking, and it's not just plastic, it's paper too. Mixed paper was being sent. You know, the scrap ban that happened in China was not just for one material, but it's also about reducing and reusing, you know, and I agree. We have to, the thing is about solid waste management is that it is a developed industry that has markets, that has grown, that has some solutions that we can point to, and that we have policies in place already. The reduction and the reusing pieces, there isn't as much of an obvious solution that people are leaning into. And you're seeing a little bit of that. You're seeing some growing reuse organizations and companies that are trying to scale it and make it larger and make it not just people like us who are taking our reusable container to the water fountain or to you know, to New Seasons or what have you, but to make it convenient so people actually use it. And I think that, again, what I think is we need to do both of those things, that all of that has to happen in tandem with each other.
All right. So we do have 2 more questions. We're at the half-hour mark. Quick reminder for the audience participants, if you want to ask a question, make sure to put that in the Q&A section down below. But one of the things that was brought up in the last question was about communities. And I feel like this film did a really good job of showing the links between the plastics crisis and other pressing issues, such as how it connects with climate, human health, environmental justice, and the global waste trade, and so much more. What reflections did you have on those intersections, and what communities do you feel are most impacted by this? Yeah. Nancy, you want to go?
I can take this
Nancy,
on.
please. Yeah.
It's a challenging question. So yeah, but I mean, I think that what this film does so well that you know, somebody else mentioned other films haven't, I think it was Lauren, you mentioned, other films haven't been able to do in the past is make those connections very clear in a way that just hasn't. So I think, you know, I got into the work of plastics pollution from a marine perspective and just from like my own making changes in my own personal life. But I think what this film shows so well is that, you know, this is not a turtle in a straw issue. I mean, it is, but it's it's a very real problem that has impacts on people and communities. And we, you know, just like with climate change, we know that communities that are most impacted are often those who are contributing the least to the problem. You know, they highlighted so many good instances of these communities that had zero waste, you know, systems, bulk systems that, you know, they were doing fine with. And so, you know, they're not necessarily the ones contributing to the problem, and yet they're facing, you know, the huge impacts, the bulk of the impacts. So I think that it just shows those connections really well in terms of an answer. You know, the feeling and the frustration is there. I think that if we take action on plastic pollution, we can take action on environmental justice. We can try and tackle all these things together because they are all interconnected and interrelated.
Yeah, it feels like when we just talk about it as a waste management issue too, then it's all their fault. Everybody downstream's fault because they are putting it into landfills that they're not managing well. Yeah. And they made that so clear in the movie, and it was so good to have them say, you know, and it's funny because that data is kind of new that they, you know, that the Oxford came out with that was showing that the ocean pollution is coming from a mismanagement in you know, in other countries than the U.S. and Europe, and it's so funny that what they did is with even that study is turn it around and say, therefore it's a waste management problem, and therefore, you know, we need to tell them to manage their waste better, and yet the same study showed that all the production and all the consumption of the plastic is happening here and in Europe. And so why did they come up with a solution that was waste management when even their study showed that it was the production and the use of material that was happening here? So yeah, I thought that was really good that they called them out on that.
Unless there's any other.
Like this, oh, sorry. The scene. This. Oh, sorry. Like I was just, it made me think of the scene with the shampoo bottle, like where she's holding the Head and Shoulders and talking about the differences in one place versus the sachets in another country. I just think that shows, yeah, some of the differences. Sorry, that was all I wanted to say.
Oh yeah, I agree totally. That was eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
That's eye-opening for me too, and but I still struggle at the same time of you know, the quality of life that we enjoy here and the wages that we are paid, you know, by being in America, having a much higher standard of living here than in other places where the economics don't support, you know, a family to be able to buy that bottle. I do struggle with that. I still totally know that we need to, I struggle with the fact that they're able to enjoy those creature comforts that we are, you know, while I still recognize the fact that those materials are causing those challenges. I'm trying to view it from their perspective too. I'm trying to not be patriarchal and saying like, oh, this has to be different, because I recognize that they want those things too. And so I struggle with how we can, given the capitalistic system that we live in globally, you know, with this global trade of what the solution there is. So we're able to still give them that and do that. I apologize. That's just an honest reaction for me, is that I don't want to otherize this, that, you know, the solution is, oh, let's take that away from them, you know, and I don't know what the solution is.
But is the shampoo bottle really that satisfying? I mean, is it really satisfying our needs? I don't know.
Having shampoo is, you know, I mean,
so
and being able to deliver shampoo is, and I guess that's what I was thinking, not necessarily having the bottle, but having shampoo is the creature comfort I was talking about, not having the bottle of it.
Yeah.
Any other answers to that? Move on to the last question, then we'll do audience questions.
Great.
Okay. And then this was also kind of brought up in some of our other question answers. So the film talks a lot about single-use plastics and encourages durables and reuse. While we are heading in that direction, particularly locally with recent implemented bans on single-use plastic items, COVID-19 seems to have halted a lot of this progress and pointed us back towards single-use items. So where do you think we go from here?
I've definitely been aware that the virus is bad in terms of single-use plastics. Friday night is date night in my home, and we've been getting takeout from local restaurants to support them, tipping extra, anything we can do to help out. But much to my chagrin, every single one of these meals comes in one piece of single-use plastic after another, most of which I know for sure I'm not going to be able to effectively recycle. And so that's very frustrating. It occurred to me as we were talking earlier, though, I wonder if there isn't a modest, very small role that master recyclers can play here, in that could we all, during this situation, start asking the restaurants that we're trying to support to please use paper packaging for the food, for example, and avoid the single-use plastics. Small thing, I know, doesn't solve anything worldwide, but I've always believed that, we have to do what we can, where and when we can.
Right, and many of those papers would still end up in the garbage rather than recycling.
Sure, but they're not going to end, they won't be in a river system somewhere.
Right. Any other responses to that? And then I want to get to, we're running a little over, but I want to get to some audience questions.
I was just going to say, like prior to the COVID, with our Bring Your Own Cup campaign, Nosa Familia was working on a program with cost for to-go. So they were charging 25 cents for anyone who wanted a to-go cup. And then if they brought their own, they got a discount. So I think that was a really interesting model that I think maybe may have a future as organizations and businesses try out this approach and say, all right, let's give people options, and then let's try to incentivize them to kind of help with this issue and give them, not just because I want to do it, it's the right thing to do, but it's actually financially supportive as well. So I think the opportunities for those types of businesses to offer different ways of packaging or delivering these services to us. So we're not paying for the packaging, we're paying for the actual items and the service of getting it to us. There's some maybe new creative ways that this could open up. So kind of looking forward to maybe there's some creativity and innovation that comes out of this as well.
Yeah, Nancy?
Yeah, I think going off of that, Berkeley has implemented a 25 cents fee, so it'll be really interesting. I mean, I don't know where it's at now with everything. Obviously, everything's changing by the day, but it'll be interesting to see where their 25 cents fee on coffee cups goes. But yeah, I think that I'm still very hopeful, and I think this is just a time for us to figure out those systems and just build that trust in those systems. Reusables can be washed and they can be sanitized, and I think it's really about people trusting in that system more than it is about what type of thing it is, because a single-use item can carry COVID just like a reusable item can. So it's just about trusting the processes that we have in place and making those as strong and as sturdy and as resilient as we can. So I think that the more we can do that, the better. And Surfrider has put out a couple of different blog articles on why we feel like reusables are still a very safe bet, as long as you're following proper cleaning procedures. So I'm happy to share those with Stacy, and you can send them out. And then I would also point people to Upstream Solutions. They've been putting out a lot of webinars. There's actually one that happened just right during this panel discussion on COVID from the Ecology Center that was featured in the film on COVID and reusables. So I think it's a recorded webinar. So if you wanted to reach out to the Ecology Center to get that webinar, I'm sure they'll record that one. And there's been a couple others by Upstream, just kind of discussing the topic, and a lot of good information and a lot of good dialogue to figure out next steps. So
wonderful. Yeah. So this is a great conversation. I want to start opening it up for audience questions. So we're going to bring Tenille on. Hi, Tenille. Tenille has been reading the questions as they've been coming in, and she's going to give us our first audience question.
Yeah, so thank you guys for the comments. Hopefully some of the questions that have been asked have kind of covered those that you have posed. I'm hoping to get at least 2 out here. So one of the questions is, how do gas and oil subsidies work, and how can we change them to encourage reuse and recycling versus production of more virgin materials? I realize none of you are necessarily a petrol background, but comments, questions?
Well, my economics training wants me to just chime in here a little bit and just say that from my point of view, the largest single subsidy that the oil and gas industry enjoy is that they're not asked to pay for the price of carbon. It's external to their product. And it's, many people would argue, is the root cause of the problem. And so I think not paying for carbon has had a very negative impact on our environment. And I really do support a carbon tax. Would like to see that happen.
Seeing a lot of head nods. Anyone else want to add to that?
I mean, subsidy programs are really complicated, and they're really hard to change once they're in place, you know, and that goes across any industry, but certainly the oil and gas. I don't know the particulars on how that works, but that changing that would talk about, we are talking about internalization of costs, you know, like the plastics recycling system is separate from the plastics production system. You know, so the cost of plastic recycling is not internalized like it is, say, with paper. Whereas paper, the you know, paper recycling is kind of part of the larger paper mill industry. You know, and I think that's an important piece is having that embedded, whether it's through a carbon tax or something else. I think it's important.
At least maybe a phased out the subsidies, so that the businesses can plan, and so it's not dropped on them immediately, which they would obviously, you know, push back on. But maybe if there's agreement that over the next 5 years that subsidy is going to get trickled away, and so they have time to adjust, and it's not going to hit them immediately, but knowing that the long term that's not going to be there, and you need to rethink your strategy and your plans going forward. You know, I think something like that could be more achievable.
All right, Tenille, next question.
Okay. What can be done to hold the plastic creators accountable, or how do we stop this problem upstream?
I think that we continue to reduce our use and continue to ask questions, continue to ask for transparency, and you know, commitments that are made. Let's make sure those are followed through, and if not, ask why, and ask ourselves what we can do to change the system or grow the system in a way that we want to see it happen. That's my short answer. It's a complicated question.
Yeah, what Dave said earlier is, you know, this isn't necessarily a purely journalistic activity of a balanced kind of thing. This was a polemic, right? And I think that these types of polemics are really important in terms of driving consumer opinion, which is ultimately is what is changing. You know, I would argue the arc of the behavior of these companies is changing for the better, in that there is, like, for instance, the Trash Free Seas Alliance is $1.5 billion. It's not enough money, but it is the start of something, in my opinion. You know, and I think that these types of things have to keep pushing it and keep moving that forward, because the producers were a part of the problem, and they really do have to be part of the solution as well.
I've been encouraged recently by the impact of all of the grassroots efforts on this issue over the last year. And it certainly reached a crescendo not too long ago with the emphasis on all the plastics floating around our oceans. And as all of that started to hit the media, I certainly was aware of just outright fear, frankly, on the part of different plastic industry representatives who were worried that perhaps they're going to lose their social license to operate. And so I'm very encouraged by the kind of grassroots efforts of which I would call this evening a part of that. I think we can have an impact and are making a difference. We need to do more, but I'm encouraged.
I have one more question. So this movie should be promoted to the public. It should be on Netflix. How do we make that happen? Anybody know?
It is on Netflix.
Oh, nice.
It is?
It's online somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on Netflix. I mean, that's a licensing thing. Sorry.
Oh, never mind.
I believe that in part the model of the story of plastic is to try to license it so it is in front of people like the master recyclers and like the people who are listening in to be able to kind of affect that change. That's my understanding. My hope is, of course, that something like this would be licensed. The Plastics China, which is the other documentary I write, was free on Amazon Prime if you're a subscriber, or and Frontline are often on Netflix. So I don't know what would take Netflix particularly to license it, but you should talk to the producers.
But Dylan, you said you bought it for $3. So you.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. She said Netflix. Yes, it was on Amazon. You can buy it for $3. That's what I did because the link didn't work, and I said, "How much is it?" $3. I figured I could pay $3 and give some money to the producers, and yeah. So Amazon Video, I guess.
And Nancy has another showing that you could help promote if people want to get the word out. What was that, Nancy?
Yeah, so June 8th is World Oceans Day. So I think Osberg students, Surfrider Foundation, and Environment Oregon, and maybe some other partners, it's still being planned, but are all collaborating to try and put on a couple different screenings on that day. And I think we've got a lot of screenings, I think 500 or something. So we should have quite a few. So June 8th, World Oceans Day. And then, yeah, I believe that the producers are also willing to, share the film for free. I think PSU, I was listening in on a panel that they did, and they said they didn't charge anything to do the screening. So I think it's free to set up a screening. And you can just do that through the website, and that's a way to get it out there for sure. Yeah.
The screening didn't cost us anything, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So with that, we're running out of time. So thanks to Neil, disappeared. So I'd like to close this conversation with one more question for our panelists. And before that, I want to thank everyone for joining. Keep an eye out for a follow-up email from me on Tuesday. It will have a survey that the story of plastic producers have developed that they want some information on, as well as some of the resources that we've mentioned today in this conversation, as well as some ideas for you to take action, because this is all about grassroots movement and taking action. So in talking about taking action, here's my closing question. Lauren, did you have something you wanted to add? Go fast.
The email will also have this recording on the YouTube, so you'll be able to relook at it, and if you want.
Yeah, thank you. So the story of plastic illustrates how we can't recycle our way out of the plastics pollution crisis. The plastics value chain is just too complex, and it spans the whole globe from oil and gas extraction, production, to distribution, disposal, recycling, incineration, and more. What steps can we take to address the problem at the source as individuals, as master recyclers, as local governments, advocates, for business owners. Love to hear your ideas.
I can start.
Yeah.
I think when we spend money, we are voting. And so I think when we look at the things we purchase and spend money on, I think that's a good incentive for businesses to react. And I think you're seeing businesses change because they're seeing people are spending money towards those more sustainable options. So I think we can have a really big influence by really looking at the things that we're purchasing or not purchasing to send a message as well. And then also please vote at the ballot box and support candidates that are supporting these types of initiatives. Also, I think the discussion around the externality costs is really important around the carbon tax or producer responsibility, and trying to provide some kind of incentives for organizations and consumers to make better choices. I think that will really help the situation. And then just from our organization, we had a zero waste conference last 2018, and we're planning to do another one this year. And that's just try to bring people together who are working towards reuse and reduction efforts here in the local Portland metro area. So if you're interested in that, you can check out our website for more details. We'll probably be looking at maybe November this year as a virtual event.
I would say, keep the pressure on. Your voices are heard, whether it's by purchase or by noise or by your votes. I think it's incredibly important to stay engaged and stay knowledgeable. I think just like we don't want to do wish cycling, I think there's also sort of a wishful, well, what if we just did this? Try to coalesce around an idea and push for that idea. People listen, and you can really make a powerful change. My organization has a lot of data and a lot of reports that can help support your arguments at recyclingpartnership.org. But really it's the power of people like you that are able to make the change to, help your neighbors, to help your friends, to help your family, to help really make a change in this world for good.
Yeah, I would just say, be the wonderful master recyclers that you are. Master recyclers are everywhere. You're in local government, you're in the businesses, you're in the nonprofits. Some of you are being strong advocates for policy change. Some of you are organizing repair cafes. And the great work that you do is all tackling it. And it doesn't have to be either or, because there's so many of us. So if you're really into being the one that wants to see policy change, do that. It counts as volunteer hours to be that policy changer. If you want to do organizing something in your neighborhood and just your church or your business, do that. It all makes a difference because we're collectively doing change.
And it's your Dave?
Yeah. I can go. Yeah, I would echo off of that. Just to say that, I first got started working on plastic pollution, did a bunch of personal waste audits, and I think, I know it's a weird time to be doing them, and maybe not right now is not the time, but maybe down the road. I just think that doing waste audits are a really valuable way to kind of look at how you can reduce plastic in your own life, and that can get conversations going and get people talking and thinking, and also educating yourself on the recycling right rules. So yeah, I think there's a lot that you can do. Surfrider is a nonprofit, and we are entirely volunteer run. I'm a volunteer myself, and we're always looking to engage people in beach cleanups, but we also do city cleanups, which are obviously on hold at the moment, but hopefully we'll get those in the coming months up and running. So get out with us on a cleanup, get engaged with, we also have an ocean friendly restaurants program and do a lot of policy work. So yeah, love to see your faces at an event down the road. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to sort of echo what others have said. Brian talked about voting at the ballot box, big believer in that. I think you also mentioned vote with your wallet on what you buy and don't buy. And then to echo myself, just I'm a great believer in speaking up politely and letting people know how we feel about things. It will make a difference.
Nice. We will collectively make a difference. I like that. So with that, we are basically out of time. Again, so many thanks to our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us and for dealing with the kind of hiccup of the first link breaking, and moving forward, you all are fantastic. Also, many thanks to our audience members who joined in, and also for your patience with the link. Go out there, do amazing things, but socially distanced. And with that, please keep a lookout for the email that'll come out on Tuesday with a bunch of resources and ideas for ways that you can take action. In there will also be a few ideas for socially distanced ways to take actions. And well, that's basically our panel today. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Good
so
job,
much.
Stacy.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you. Thank you,
Okay.
Stacy.
Thanks, Master Recyclers.
Thanks, Faster Recyclers.
We miss you.
Yeah.